Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Mike Nizik and welcome to New York Tech Talk. Today we're going to be talking about SQL, SQL, Structured Query Language. It's a standard language that all databases speak to each other and all applications speak to all databases. Very powerful language. It's something you should know in your career. So we're going to go over a few very specific pieces of SQL. We're going to talk about DDL, Data Definition Language, and DML, Data Manipulation Language. With these two portions of SQL, you can create and alter database structures, and then you can also manipulate the data inside those databases. In this edition of New York Tech Talk, we're going to talk about 4 specific commands, which is select, insert, update, and delete, which with those 4 commands, you can do so much very powerful work with these databases. All right, so let's get going.
Okay, everyone, so let's get started on the select statement first. Please take note that there is a database called eTickDemo. There is a series of tables, and one of the table names is called eTickNames. That is the table that we'll be working with throughout the demonstration of the data manipulation language, or DML, for structured query language, or SQL. So the first thing we'll look at is the basic select statement. If we look at the select statement here, select star from eTickNames. eTickNames is the table, select is the command, from is the attribute that we use to select everything because we're using a star. So if we highlight this in our query window and we execute, this will return every field from every record in the table. So you'll see down here this result set that it gave us. The first name field, the last name field, the middle name field, every single field. Now, if you're dealing with a table and it has many fields, it could get very confusing. You may not be able to see things in order. The last name might be here and the salary field might be down here, and you might want them together. So you need to have a way to control what fields that you select in what order. And we do that with the comma. We select the actual field names separated by a comma, and then use the same parameters for the from command to select from the table name. And when you do that, now we basically just get the first and last name field because that's what we've identified. So you have a way to configure the select statement very easily to get what you want very quickly. Finally, we have a select command where we can use a where clause to get only certain fields where only certain variables or attributes exist, right? So in this case, we only want the last name field to show up from the eTickNames table where the city in that particular record equals Greenport. We want to see how many people live in Greenport from the eTickNames. And we only get the 2 names, the last name field, from that table where the city equals Greenport. And then we have a way to use the select statement to export data from one table into another. Why would we want to do that? Sometimes tables are being used by hundreds or even thousands of people at one time, and the queries are very slow. Sometimes they actually cause performance issues with people, accessing the table for other reasons. So what we do is we use the select into command, and we select everything into one table name that we're creating from scratch from another table. In this case, you don't see an eTickNames2 table over here, but if we selected star into eTickNames2 from eTickNames, it will, let me fix that. If I delete this table, eTickNames2, so sometimes we want to use the select command to select data from one table into another table. Why would we want to do that? We'd want to do that because sometimes we don't want to access data live while it's being used by other applications. If hundreds or even thousands of users are connecting to a table to do regular queries and lookups, and we're running queries on that table ourselves, we could slow them down, we could cause issues. And if we make an error, we could damage that data for future use. So what we do is we select star into a table name that doesn't exist from a table name that exists. And what that will do is it will, it says 8 rows affected here. What it will do is it will create the table that you didn't see before, that you don't see now. It'll create a new table. Now that table isn't being used by anybody. It's a table that you could use just for your current set of queries. And then once you get the results, you can delete it yourself. So it gives you a way to export data from one table into another table that's not being used, and it's not dangerous if you cause any damage to that during your queries. All right, and finally, we want to be able to use the select command to select certain fields from a table, but we don't want to be able to order those in ascending and descending order by another field or series of fields. In this case, we use the order by clause. And when we use the order by clause, we're selecting the first name and last name field, in this case, from eTick names like we have in previous queries, but now we're ordering them by another field. So in this case, we order them by last name, right? So in this case, last name is in order from A to Z. If we then change that from ascending to descending, and we also highlight that query and select it and run it, now we'll have them from descending order from Z to A in this case. All right. So that is your select statement. Very, very powerful. All kinds of ways to get data out of your tables without causing any issues. And very, very quick. You can join tables together, and you can also select various different fields out of that table for access. Okay, next up, let's look at the update statement. The reason we use the update statement in DML, data manipulation language, which is part of SQL, structured query language, is that we don't always want to just select data so we can see it. Most of the time we are, because we want to access data that's in our tables, but sometimes we want to update data. We want to actually update a value that's in a certain field or series of fields. And the update statement works where you have the update statement, but then you have the table that you want to update, and then you set something equal to something else where something equals something else, right? So you have these different conditionals that you can use. So in this case, we're going to update the eTick names table, and we're going to set the address field to 90 where the name ID equals 5. So if we did a quick select statement just to get an idea of what we have in our database, Jennifer Johnson currently lives at the address 90. Okay, so what we want to do here, since she already lives at 90, is if we come down to the update statement here and we select 91, right? We want to update her address to 91. It's because the name ID equals 5 here, it's only going to edit this one field of this one record. The reason that we have primary keys, which are unique indexes that unique IDs and values that identify records as unique, is so that we can do this type of exercise. So right now, if we update eTick names and set the address equals 91 where name ID equals 5, we are only going to update one row and have one row affected. And when we actually select all of our names again, we're going to see that Jennifer Johnson now lives at 91. Okay, so update's a very important action that we have to update data that's in our tables and update that data in a way so that we're not affecting any other data, we're not affecting any other records, and we're not affecting any other parts of the record except for what we want to use in the set statement. Okay, if we set the address equal to 91, that's fine, but if we set the middle name equal to Mary in this case, it would update her middle name to Mary. Now, if we didn't have a where clause, here's the danger in making mistakes in SQL and in DML. If you didn't have the where clause, it would set the address to 91 for every single record in your table. So you have to be extremely careful when you're using the update command in your databases so that you don't make any errors that way. All right, so next up, let's take a look at the insert command. The reason we have an insert command is because we've used the select command to see what's in our database and to see certain fields of our tables in certain orders, but we've used the update command to update very specific records that exist already. But we don't have a way yet to add new records into the table, which is where the insert command comes in. So insert has a very specific function where it's going to add data to the tables. And the way we do that is we insert into is our command. We use the table name that we're currently working with, which in this case is eTick names. Then we use the open paren, close paren to create a section where we actually separate the fields we're going to be adding data into by commas. Right, so we insert into eTick names. We put the fields that we're adding data into first. Then we use the values command or attribute, and then we tell the system what values using DML. We tell the system what values we want to place in the first name and last name columns, fields, because that's what we've identified here. All right. So if we do a quick select statement of our entire database, we do not see currently a value for Tony Williams. Okay, we don't see Tony Williams in here. right? And this is select star from eTick name, so it's everything. So if we just select this one statement here and execute that, it'll tell us that one row is affected, but how do we know what was affected? We go back and run a select statement, and that will actually give us every record in our system, in our table. Now we have a Tony Williams, his name ID is 11, okay? So now what we've used is the insert command to add a record into our table that was not there before. For our insert command, we only added in first name and last name, but we could continue with our commas and insert in city and any value that we wanted to add data for. We could have added that, okay? And that's how you use the insert command to add records to your table. So finally, for DML, data manipulation language, in our 4 commands, select, update, insert, and delete, let's look at the delete function. So we just added in a record called Tony Williams into our database, into our table. And if we find out that Tony Williams has a name ID, a unique primary key of 11, what we want to do is we want to delete Tony. In this example, we want to delete Tony that we just added from eTick names. So the only way to do that is really we could take a number of different field values and try to find it, but there might be duplicates. So the only real way to identify Tony Williams as the real unique Tony Williams is his name ID, which we know is a primary key, so it's got to be unique. So here, we don't want to do 10, we want to basically set that to 11 because Tony Williams is 11. So we want to delete from the table name where name ID equals 11. Cautionary note here, if you don't have a where clause here, you will delete every name in your database. So it's extremely dangerous to work in administrative mode here, but this is what being a database administrator is all about. If we use the delete command from eTick names where name ID equals 11, what we'll get is we'll get a one row affected, but we don't really know what was affected until we select star from eTick names, okay? And what we see is that we're now at name ID equals 8, so we've deleted 11. We have nothing more than 11, so Tony's gone. So using the select statement shows us everything that's in the table. Using the update statement allows us to update certain information in certain fields of each record that exists. Insert allows us to add records that don't exist yet, and delete allows us to delete all data from a table if you want to, or even if by accident, unfortunately. But if you want to delete only certain records, you can delete only certain records that have certain parameters. Or if you really want to be very specific, like we were, you can delete records for a certain key ID, which you can guarantee that that's the only record that should be deleted because the key ID matches and it's unique to that record in that table.
So that concludes our segment for today on SQL, Structured Query Language. We hope you learned a lot. We hope you had a great time. And we look forward to seeing you on our next segment of New York Tech Talk. Once again, I'm Dr. Mike Nizik from New York Tech, and we'll see you next time.